You know, for over 40 years, CED has been a leader in promoting the investment in quality early childhood education. And in fact, CED recently released a report about the importance of early learning settings and the strength of the child care workforce. And those copies of that report should be at your place. If not, there are copies outside as well. CED understands that the business community ultimately is the stakeholder of the entire education system in the country. We are the consumers, if you will, of the output of the system. And so investing in the earliest years is the best way to promote school readiness, education success, and equality of opportunity. We're very fortunate today to have three individuals with us who each have a different lens on early learning, but who all share a common goal, and that is to expand access to high-quality early learning programs. So speaking first today is Debra Phillips, the professor of psychology and the vice dean at the faculty at Georgetown College. She's also an affiliated faculty member at the McCourt School of Public Policy at Georgetown. Debra was the first executive director of the Board on Children, Youth, and Families of the National Research Council and the Institute of Medicine that produced the landmark report From Neurons to Neighborhoods, the Science of Early Childhood Development. And while she's authored many publications, her first work with a core group of experts in producing reports, investing in our future, the evidence base on preschool, and puzzling it out, the current state of scientific knowledge on pre-K, and all of those effects are key today. So the presenters today will be Jeffrey Dunn, President and CEO of Sesame Workshop, Larry Jensen, the President and CEO of Cushman Wakefield, and of course, Deborah. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm just delighted to be here. Unfortunately, I have to let you know that I have to run back to Georgetown to teach a very eager group of graduate students, very diverse, very dependent on what happens with the tuition issue in the Higher Education Act, the tax bill. And the class starts at 2 o'clock. So I'm going to, talk and run. But anybody should feel free to contact me anytime if you'd like to continue this important conversation. So I am very delighted to be discussing our recent consensus report on the current state of scientific knowledge on pre-kindergarten effects. Let's see here. I think there we go. Be happy to provide you information to how to get your hands on this report. So this team undertook the arduous work of forging consensus out of a complex evidence base in the high-stakes context of intense public scrutiny of pre-K education. We came together on this project with deep, long-standing mutual respect and a shared commitment to using science for public purposes, but also with very different disciplinary lenses. You have economists, you have developmental psychologists, you have political scientists, you have education specialists on this panel. We also had very different experiences studying pre-K education that have produced different results. For those of you who know this field, we can call it from Tennessee to Tulsa, where we've done our work. And therein lies both the challenge of reaching consensus and the power of having done so. Why is this statement important and timely from a business perspective? You know that one of the best ways to build a productive and prosperous society is to start early in building children's foundation for learning, health, nutrition, and positive behavior. Brain development, we know that the foundational architecture of the adult brain, the wires and the juices, if you will, are laid down in the first 5 years of life. The brain actively recruits information from the surrounding environment to shape this development. The brain, however, is completely ecumenical. It is as eager to recruit the bad stuff as it is the good stuff. High-quality pre-K experiences help to ensure that it recruits the good stuff. It is also the first step of workforce development. It is in pre-K that children first acquire pre-literacy and pre-math knowledge and skills, but equally and honestly, in my opinion, if not more important, is that they learn the critical habits and skills that will ultimately serve them well in the workplace and in life. Showing up on time, focusing their attention on what needs to get done, working as part of a team, incorporating feedback, or to use the wonderful list that your company has provided us, to be kind, to value your team, to step up, and so on and so forth. Children first learn this in the context of their earliest classroom experiences. I'm sure you all know the evidence on return on investment of pre-K education. In Tulsa, our evidence tells us that attendance in pre-K is a more powerful predictor of middle school achievement than is maternal education. And maternal education, believe me, is one of the most powerful predictors of almost any developmental outcome that you can find. I don't need to tell this group that early education is an essential job support for parents. Early care and education also is a business that depends on a workforce. It is a workforce that is currently earning lower wages than equally educated and trained kindergarten through 12th grade teachers, with profound implications for recruiting and retaining talent into this very, very important profession. Many of them actually are on food stamps and other nutrition programs because their incomes qualify them for most of our public assistance programs. CED has been at the forefront of this issue going back to the 1970s when they were one of the first very powerful, influential organizations to shout out the issue then of childcare and its importance for the productivity of our society. And as you just heard today, there's yet the most recent report coming out from CED on this issue. I am very proud to be a new member of the Research Advisory Board of this fabulous organization and look forward to working with all of you in that context. So with 42 states in the District of Columbia having now introduced and innovated with scaled up state and school district funded pre-K programs, it's a very good time to take stock of how we're doing and how we need to move forward to optimize the investments that we're making in these programs. And we sought to move beyond piecemeal presentation of evidence on pre-K programs, one study at a time, one place at a time, one stage of development at a time, to really provide a completed puzzle that summarizes what we currently know. An overarching message of our statement, based in the developmental and learning sciences and reflected in one of our first consensus statements in the report, summarized here, is that pre-K is not an end in and of itself. Pre-K does not happen in a vacuum. A child's learning over the course of the pre-K years builds on their prior development and sets the stage for future learning, which is profoundly affected by children's experiences in kindergarten and beyond. You can think about pre-K as really being situated at a very critical moment after those very influential infant and toddler years and moving then the child on into the beginning of their K-12 years. Learning is continuous and cumulative. We all know that. Hopefully, we're all still continuing to learn. Effective pre-K education depends on attending what happens before pre-K, what happens during pre-K, and what happens after pre-K as children enter elementary school. Just as we do not ask what second grade accomplishes in isolation from what happened in first grade and what happens in third grade and fourth grade, or hold this single year accountable for middle school achievement test scores, high school graduation, and adult earnings, which many people do, it is time to re-examine how we consider the pre-K year. The pressing and most useful question today is how can we ensure that we have an effective pre-K through elementary system in which learning gets charged and recharged sequentially and cumulatively as children progress through school. So I want to turn to a key finding from our consensus statements. And I'll read it to you because it's really so fundamental. Convincing evidence shows that children attending a diverse array of state and school district pre-K programs are more ready for school at the end of their pre-K year than children who do not attend pre-K. Improvements in academic areas such as literacy and numeracy are most common. The smaller number of studies of social-emotional and self-regulatory development generally show more modest but still positive improvements in those areas. In short, most evaluation studies show that pre-K works. Moreover, many pre-K programs are delivering greater improvements in learning at the end of that pre-K year for children growing up under conditions of economic disadvantage and instability, and for dual language learners than for other children. Precisely the children who are most at risk for getting left behind their more advantaged and their English-speaking peers, a gap that has already opened up by the time children are 3 years old. But our work is far from done. Not all pre-K programs are equally effective, and there are many reasons to believe that pre-K can do more to power up early learning. Scientists and policymakers, business leaders, and educators alike are motivated to ensure that all young children have access to pre-K settings that genuinely broaden and deepen their learning. This means supporting their ability to talk about math concepts like cardinality and measurement, to problem solve, not just to count, helping them to acquire a rich vocabulary and a capacity to tell an organized story, not just teaching them to recite the alphabet. It requires that they learn to work collaboratively, not just to take turns. All young children deserve access to pre-K settings that will foster capacities to focus attention, to remember and follow directions, to develop a strong motivation to learn, and a positive view of themselves as learners. We offer some good bet targets for next stage efforts to further strengthen the nation's existing pre-K programs, focused on ensuring that teachers are supported through strong evidence-based professional development and coaching, to implement curricula that are proven to foster and deepen the critical skills that I just mentioned to you, and to provide well-organized, positive, stress-free classroom environments in which active, engaged learning can occur. Even with a strong initial charge, however, learning can stagnate if children's developing knowledge and skills are not recharged when they enter elementary school. This is why we explicitly direct attention to the elementary grades in this report that is fundamentally about pre-K. Perhaps the greatest challenge facing scientists, educators, and policymakers alike is to keep every child moving forward on his or her learning trajectory as she enters formal schooling. This is the fundamental challenge of every elementary teacher. It entails understanding each child's starting place, where he or she needs to go next, and how to get her there, and how best to scaffold this forward movement for each child in a classroom. If a child has learned to count to 5 and discuss more and less in pre-K, she's ready to count to 10, and then to learn cardinality, and then subitizing, and then beginning to problem solve and be able to talk about her answers. If she's not helped to get from 5 to 10 in kindergarten, perhaps because her classmates are still learning to count to 5, she will be put in what is effectively a learning dead zone. And this child's, and cumulatively the nation's, investment in pre-K will be squandered. Enabling all children to move forward from differential initial repertoires of skill, knowledge, and behavior is extremely challenging. Early education is rocket science. The challenge is made all the more urgent by current policy discussions of pre-K education. In addition to school readiness, our society has harbored the hope that pre-K will deliver long-lasting effects. And here, the current state of the evidence leaves us with less to report. we conclude that convincing evidence on the longer-term impacts of scaled-up pre-K programs on academic outcomes and school progress is sparse, precluding broad conclusions. The evidence that does exist often shows that pre-K induced improvements in learning are in fact detectable during elementary school, and I can report from Tulsa, Oklahoma, that we are seeing lasting effects into middle school. But other studies have also revealed no lasting impacts and even some reversed impacts for some programs. Thus the title Puzzle for this report. And the jury is still out. So why might this be so? The answer surely lies in the overarching message of our statement. Children enter pre-K with divergent prior early education and home experiences, and they move from pre-K into a vast range of elementary schools across the nation that make very few efforts to make sure that what happens to children in pre-K is then coordinated, organized with what happens when children enter kindergarten. They are worlds apart in far too many places. If we ignore this variability in and lack of coordination among what happens before, during, and after the pre-K year, we run the risk of missing information that can help us understand how to design and re-engineer pre-K in specific locales to get the best results. Importantly, contradictory findings, puzzle pieces that don't fit together, are precisely that move people and motivate people like me who are scientists forward to figure things out, which is precisely what we're doing right now. And this brings me to our final consensus point, which calls for ongoing innovation and evaluation to ensure continued improvement in creating and sustaining children's learning gains through research practice partnerships. And there are marvelous examples around the country of these exciting endeavors that are happening, including a very exciting one in Memphis, Tennessee, which did produce some of the less encouraging results about pre-K, and it totally motivated their remarkable commissioner of education to go into every single pre-K classroom in her district and to make improvements in what they're doing in those classrooms. So in closing, no one thinks we've yet devised the most effective possible pre-K program. We close our report with the following statement. We have a national platform on which to build next stage, increasingly effective and longer lasting pre-K programs. The hard work of refining and improving these programs so that they can fully support the intellectual and social skills the nation will need in the future has just begun. Nonetheless, the scientific rationale, the uniformly positive evidence of impact on kindergarten readiness, and the nascent body of ongoing inquiry about long-term impacts lead us to conclude that continued implementation of scaled-up pre-K programs is in order as long as the implementation is accompanied by rigorous evaluation of impact. Thank you very much. And now I have the pleasure to introduce Jeff Dunn, President and CEO of Sesame Workshop and CED member. As Chief Executive Officer of Sesame Workshop, Jeff is a nonprofit business leader producing educational content that helps children go smarter, stronger, and healthier. Sesame materials and characters reach children, parents, and providers and are embedded in community initiatives throughout the country. Sesame is at the forefront of meeting the needs of all children, regardless of income, neighborhood, or life circumstances such as military deployment of a parent, living in a war-torn country, or natural disasters that devastate entire regions. So Jeff, please tell us about the Sesame Communities program and the impact that it has had on families and their young children. All set.
Thank you. Thank you, Deborah, and good luck getting back to Georgetown. So, yeah, I have three goals. We've got 15 minutes here, I guess. I've got three goals today for you. The first is to explain to you what Sesame Workshop does, because I think a lot of people don't often understand what we do. We're best known for the show, but we do so much more than that. The second is to tell you about our new program that we have that directly addresses the topic that we're talking about today, Sesame Street and Communities, and how we're helping kids and families cope with the toxic stress and trauma that really inhibits that early education that is so necessary that Deborah talked about. And then the third, like others, is to issue a call to action. And I think that this group, given who you are, I think that's going to be a theme for the day, because we all need to step up. We are living in a world where we cannot depend necessarily on the institutions that maybe we depended on in the past. And if we do not do some of these things, they will not get done. So I'm hoping that all of us will join. So here, let me just quickly tell you about Sesame Street. We were built around a single idea. If you read Malcolm Gladwell's Tipping Point, we were featured in it, but it was really this. It was, if you can hold the attention of children, you can educate them. And that was the blinding sort of insight. It was, we were going to entertain, but it was to entertain to educate, which is different than most. Today, we're almost 50 years old. We were founded in 1969. We'll be 50, obviously, in 2019, and we are a nonprofit, as was mentioned. A lot of people don't know that either. Educational and media organization, and our mission is to help kids grow smarter, stronger, and kinder. And it's the kinder that is, in some ways, the most challenging, actually, in terms of helping kids understand that. We focus on those early years that matter most, those preschool years. And over 1,000 research studies have been done on the effectiveness of Sesame and whether kids that watch it actually do learn, and the evidence is overwhelming that they do. And you may not know, we are now present in over 150 countries around the world, and we do this work. We help kids grow smarter, stronger, and kinder by doing three things, what we call our own MRI. We make content. We research. We provide valuable research on kids and families and media and education. And then we try and instigate others who share our mission and our values, and that, in some ways, is what we are here to do today, to engage you. So just real quickly, the Sesame Effect, we mentioned all these various tests that have been done, but basically here it boils down to this. If your kid watches Sesame Street on television, they go to kindergarten with higher scores on literacy and numeracy. It lasts all the way through. They do 16% better on average in high school grade-wise. And maybe even most importantly, they become more sophisticated at their social skills and develop greater respect for others, something we need very much. So we're best known for the TV show, but we are there when children need us, and we have tackled some big issues. So in the 1990s, when AIDS was ravaging South Africa, we were there. And we created Takalani Sesame, which is a show that dealt with this issue. It was about the stigma of AIDS and making sure that people who had it were not embarrassed to come out and acknowledge it. We then went in 2001 when Americans sent troops to Afghanistan. We were there because the military did not have the programs to help parents and families cope with deployment, injury, God forbid, death. They had no programs to help families talk about these issues. We were there for those kids. In 2002, childhood obesity really took off, and we created Healthy Habits for Life to instill sometimes food versus anytime food. And today, you may have heard about this. It's all about, we're doing a massive bit of work around refugee kids. In Syria, Iraq, Jordan, and Lebanon. This is perhaps the issue of our time. 65 million people are displaced from their homes in a region of the world that is rife with radicalism. And so we are there working with the IRC, the International Rescue Committee, to try and bring quality education to these kids. So today what I want to do is talk to you about a new program here in the United States that is going to help kids and families with their early learning, and it is called Sesame Street in Communities. So with generous funding from the Robert Johnson Foundation, we've begun this program, and here's what it is. It is a bilingual digital professional training platform that uses our curated collection of educational materials. We have 50 years of educational materials. We're making this available to local community service providers to use in their direct work with families in need. And we hope to make this available in 50 cities and regions across the country. Now, Here's the thing, over half of, and this gets back to what you were saying earlier about kids and, in food, half of U.S. kids under 6 live in or near poverty. Poverty leads to these economic social conditions which produce all kinds of trauma, and if kids have trauma, they cannot learn. Here are some of the examples of that. Maternal depression, hunger, neglect, incarceration. We do a lot of work with families of kids who've been incarcerated, their parents have been incarcerated. Abuse, substance abuse, divorce. All of these contribute to toxic stress, which reduces brain development and reduces kids' ability to learn at the most important part in their life when they need to learn. So we think there's a way to mitigate against this, and it is about nurturing relationships with the adults in their world, their parents. So we're trying to build an innovative community model that brings together the direct service providers in local communities, and in your communities where you're located, to help provide them and their families with the care and support they need. As I mentioned, it's got 2 aspects to it. One is it's a digital destination. It's curated content. It's also new content. It involves professional development. It's partner-powered implementation. So it's these local service providers who are doing the actual work with these families. So this chart kind of shows you the different types of people we're working with: churches, schools, local service providers, government agencies. All of them work with these at-risk, vulnerable families. And we are starting to tap into the power of partners. All of you in this room could be that. And these are some of the partners that we're working with already. Our goal, as I mentioned, is over the next 5 years to reach 4.5 million kids under the age of 6 and their families, to develop 200 national and local partnerships, to do it in at least 50 locations. Now, here's the thing. Calvin Coolidge famously said, "The business of America is business." I think we need to remind all of ourselves something that we believe deeply at Sesame, and that is the business of business is also America. And all of us in this room can make a difference. All of us can contribute to that. You all live in local communities. You all have these local service providers that you can help support, and if we do not do it, think about what the Congresswoman said. Think about the budget issues. If we do not do it, who? If not us, who? All of us benefit from this. All of us need this. If not us, who? So with that, I'm going to leave you with a video that, because it wouldn't be Sesame without a video, that will explain to you a little bit more in pictures what I just told you. Thank you very much.
Young children are full of potential, but adversity can stifle that potential. Too many children struggle with poverty, poor nutrition and health, and even tougher issues like the incarceration of a parent. All of these can contribute to stress in kids that can be obstacles to healthy development. But we can help if we intervene early. With the right support from caring adults, children can overcome many of life's challenges, big and small.
We see the gamut in terms of really hard things that could happen to young children. But what we know is that if it's shareable, it's bearable, and we can learn to put words to it and start to make sense of it. It loses its power over us.
We launched Sesame Street in communities to empower parents and on-the-ground partners with materials, support, and years of Sesame Street experience that can give children a healthy foundational start.
We knew that if we had our community connections coupled with the trust that the brand that Sesame Street has and the experience they have bringing high-quality early childhood education, health, wellness programming to kids and their families, that we could really make a positive impact.
Sesame Street in communities can make sure kids are prepared for school, encourage them to stay healthy,
What did you have for breakfast this morning?
and critically important these days, learn how to bounce back from traumatic experiences.
Big Bird, do you know what I like to do to feel calm? I go to my safe place. Your safe place? That's right. It is a place in my imagination where I...
Social emotional education and learning is really important, and that's something that I don't think we're doing enough of. And having Sesame Street and all of these amazing tools and resources that can only enhance the conversation that we're currently having is just kind of a perfect match in my mind.
Sesame Street has always taken on tough issues facing children.
My parents are divorced.
Using Sesame Street materials and characters help communicate, and already having that language that the child knows makes our job so much easier.
And now, with the help of our partners, we're bringing our lessons directly into the hands of children and families who need them most.
When do you get to see your mom?
Not that much,
How come?
because she's in prison.
Oh, she is?
Yeah.
It must be really hard.
It's using Muppets to tell the story allows them to not feel alone in their experience. It shows them that other people and characters have felt the same things that they're feeling. Children can grow from their experiences and out of their experiences into wonderful people.
Whether it's helping children overcome difficult circumstances or simply helping parents with the routines of the day, we're bringing Sesame Street to every street, giving all children a chance to thrive.
I urge you to join us. So now let me introduce Larry Jensen. And in my experience, having business leaders as champions for early learning can be a game changer. As we all know, sometimes it's not what is said that has the most impact, but who says it. I'm pleased to introduce Larry Jensen, President and CEO of Cushman and Wakefield Commercial Advisors, a large commercial real estate company in Memphis, Tennessee. Larry has been committed to changing the life trajectory of low-income children, and in fact works in his community as a powerful national advocate to promote early learning for all young children. Larry's leadership demonstrates the difference that business pioneers can bring to a community. Please welcome Larry Jensen.
Good afternoon. I have absolutely no qualifications to speak to you about early childhood. I'm in the real estate business and have a journalism degree. But over the years, I've come to understand better this issue, and it's especially an understanding when you have your sixth grandchild on the way. On Saturday, my oldest grandchild Mary, came up and the football game's on, and she had a book in her hands, and I had to make a choice. And I'll be honest with you, I was tempted to keep watching the game, but I realized that was not the right thing to do. And so my moment up here is to give you some personal reflections on this, but also a call to action. This issue of early childhood impacts military readiness, job readiness, crime reduction, and the economic growth of this country. It is an absolutely essential issue that we address both at the local level, the national level, that we really comprehend what the issue is, and that we are the part of the solution. I'm going to make a very bold statement that I think we could empty the jail in our community if we would deal with early childhood. That's a big statement, but why do I say that? Our Shelby County jail system has, in the county jails, about 2,500 inmates. And this is not research, this is anecdotal, and somebody should probably do the research in a more sophisticated way. But what I determined a few years ago is that within our jail of those 2,400 plus or minus inmates, 87% of them are African American. 12% are Hispanic and 1% white. Of that number, somewhere between 90 and 95% do not have a high school education. And there's also some sense that within that there's some 70% that have some kind of learning disability. And what that means is that they didn't learn to read, as the Congresswoman said, so they didn't learn to read. They did not learn to read, so they did not read to learn. And by the 8th grade, they dropped out. They had an alternative to go, and that was a gang in many cases. They did not have the ability to stay in school, and they got frustrated with it, and they left. I can go just down the street to the 36 at-risk kid organizations in our community that are working with these kind of children, and this is what you find out, that 90 to 95% of those kids that go through one of these either ministries or organizations, they graduate from high school. And they don't end up involved in the criminal justice system. And so it seems to me that if those two, that's a correlation that I can make, that if you don't get a high school education, you have a likelihood of being in the criminal justice system, but likewise, if you get a high school education, then you have a pretty good chance of not being mixed into the criminal justice system. But this starts at early childhood. You can't get to the 6th grade and say, we're going to fix this, because by they get to the 7th or 8th grade and they are gone. There are 3 things that again, this is not only my research, it's not valid with scientific approach, but there are 3 things that I've determined in my involvement in this that kids need. And again, these are children often that come out of very difficult circumstances, as we've heard. Toxic situations. Most of us have no idea what that's like. We hear about it, we talk about it, but we really don't know what it's like. But the kids that I've seen that have gotten out of this cycle, they've had 3 major things that have happened to them. 1, they've found a safe place. And if you've never been to a Boys and Girls Club in the middle of your city, I would urge you to take an afternoon, call them up. I guarantee you they'll be happy for you to come. Go around 3 o'clock when school's out and just walk in there. Walk through the neighborhood and go to the Boys and Girls Club, and you go into a place of light and warmth and a place where people care. So it's a safe place. And the second part is that there's a caring person, not a system, but a person who steps into their life at the appropriate time and tells them you can be something and you do matter. The third thing is that they have a learning environment. They have an opportunity to get tutoring or support or help with certain things, to learn to read it even past that 3rd grade level. That learning environment begins clearly at prenatal, and the science that we've just heard, it's not, you can't argue it. It's true. And so as we think about this, as we think about what our obligation is, here's the reality. If they don't learn to read, they can't read to learn. They end up with frustration. They end up dropping out. And if they do not have a way to go, they go to gangs and violence. And that's, again, not scientific, but over and over I've seen this. And so what we're doing is we're creating alternatives. And if we could get kids out of that pipeline to the criminal justice system, which is achievable, if my numbers are correct, that 95% of these kids that get that kind of help do not end up in the criminal justice system, then we can stop the violence and stop the crimes in our city. But it will not happen if we don't start very, very early. And if you look at our city in particular, there's some hope, there's some light. Let me give you just a couple of minutes about it. This year, 2017, we will have 90% of our children in our community, 4-year-olds, in some kind of pre-K program. That's a remarkable thing that's happened. Now, we're struggling right now with funding that in 2019, and we're talking about a hotel tax, and of course, the business communities, we can't do that. But can we afford not to do that? If we can do this year after year after year, and we can get these kids into these pre-K programs, it gives them a chance to get through the process. We created, and you can look this at peoplefirstpartnership.org, about probably 7 or 8 years ago. We formed it. It's government, business, philanthropy, and educators all come together. It's a 23-point plan about how to do a cradle-to-career educational in our community. Steve Odlum was an early part of this when he was in Memphis and CEO of AutoZone. We created an initiative that looked at the community stresses and problems. This was one of them, obviously. There's 2 churches in our community who have committed, 2 large churches have committed to provide a mentor for every second grader in our community. Now, this just didn't happen. It happened because, frankly, and Steve can affirm this, that business leaders came together and they said, what can we do to make a difference in this community? We need a good place to run our business, hire employees, have a healthy environment. What can we do together? And that's what came out of it. Education, there were a number of other things, but focusing on early childhood. Since between 2006 and 2016, our high school graduation rate has gone from the mid-60 percentile level to 79.7% as of this year. And we have a goal in the community to have high school graduation at 95% by 2025. And we think it's achievable. And the point here is that every child, not just my granddaughters and all they're going to get it. I'm not worried about any of the kids in this room that come out of the families here, but I am deeply concerned about those kids and families that cannot speak for themselves. That we need to be the voice. We need to be the ones who say, no child is left behind. And not federal government programs, we need their support, but this happens, in my opinion, it happens at the local level, and it happens, in my opinion, again, when the business leadership steps up and says the way we've been doing this is no longer acceptable. It's time to change, and the change is up to us. The business leaders do make a difference. There's, in your seat, there was a sheet that's called Access to Early Learning Yields Lifelong Results, and there's action steps on the back. I would just encourage those that are going back to your local community to please give thought to how I can be a part of a solution, and really it can work. Now, we're in the middle of it. We're not there yet, but we have made a difference. There are things moving in a good direction, and I just encourage you to think about how you can be a part of that, defining the problem in your local community and then helping to develop a solution. The business community is absolutely essential to create a collaboration and a cooperation between government, philanthropy, educators, businesses, and the faith community. Business can make that happen. Thank you very much.